Hello everyone, welcome back to AS and A-Level Biology with Dr. Demi. I am Dr. Demi, and in this video I will start chapter 17 of the AS and A-Level Biology syllabus. I'm sure you're really excited because now it really feels like we're getting close to the end. For those of you who are writing your major exams in 2021, I want you to know that I might not record all the chapters before your exams, but I hope that you're practicing and I hope you're sharing questions with your friends, practicing past questions and learning together. Those are some of the tips that my students use to overcome the exams and to overcome their anxiety regarding unfamiliar questions. If you have questions that are really difficult, you can post them in the comments and I'm sure some of your colleagues will be willing to assist you. If you have just found this channel, it has every single chapter from chapter 1, well, hopefully to the end by the time you're watching, of the AS and A-Level Biology syllabus for the Cambridge examinations. What I have also done is I have organized the chapters by playlist, so you can go to a playlist for a particular chapter and see all the videos under that chapter. So if you have a particular pain point, which is maybe a chapter, you can always use the playlist function so you don't have to scroll through so many videos. All right, let us get into selection and evolution and see how it relates to what we have learned so far. The first question when I start this chapter is I ask what are the causes of variation? And these are the answers that students will typically mention. Independent assortment during meiosis. If you remember, when we learned meiosis, we spoke about how the chromosomes tend to move apart independent of each other to form new gametes. We also have crossing over between the chromatids, and you'll remember this one, where the chromatids exchange sections of their genes with each other to form recombinant chromosomes. We have mutations that also result in variation, as in the case of albinism, blocking the pathway of melanin production in certain individuals and then causing them to express the albino trait. We also have random fertilization of gametes, and what this simply means is that when you have fertilization to make an offspring, that fertilization is a very random process. Let's take the human fertilization process, for example. Whenever there's an egg in the ovary and there's a sperm swimming towards the egg, that sperm has not been programmed to be the one to fertilize the egg. Its ability to reach the egg is really random, and as a result of that, it can result in a variety of traits that would then be variation. You also have random mating between organisms within a species. What this simply means is that when it comes to organisms within a species, they tend to randomly select their mates. So you might say to yourself, for example, well, I have a type. My type has to look this way and has to act that way. But you might notice that sometimes you don't even stay with your type. As long as the organism is the same species as you, you're likely to want to mate with them if they tick other boxes. So that means that we also influence variation by picking random mating amongst ourselves within our species. All of these causes of variation, except for mutation, simply result in the reshuffling of alleles to cause phenotypic variation. So for example, when it comes to a mutation will create a new allele completely. But when it comes to other aspects, we are simply shuffling the alleles together in order to create different combinations of traits. What variation means is that some individuals of a population will have an advantage over others dependent on what features they have. And in this, obviously, I will go on to explain how this affects organisms like rabbits, for example, or how it might affect butterflies and all of those other things. So these are some of the things we will learn in this chapter. An environment can also cause phenotypic variation. However, any variation that is caused by the environment is not coded for by the genes and is certainly not passed on to the offspring. There are two types of variation that we have to know. We have what we call continuous variation. Continuous variation is variation that is distributed on a continuum and is usually quantitative in nature. In other words, when you think about things like height or weight are not distinct variation traits. In other words, a person's height can be 6 feet 5 inches and someone else might be 6 feet 4 inches. They are both considered tall people, but those are not distinct bands because who defines who is tall and who is not? And so what we see with continuous variation is we have a continuum of variation as opposed to distinct bands that segregate individuals. In discontinuous variation, things are a little bit different. This continuous variation means that you can put the individuals into distinct categories with no intermediates. An example of this is when you have blood groups. You're either blood group A, B, AB, or O. You don't fit into any other intermediate between that. So you can't be partially A and partially X, which is something that is just arbitrary. In this continuous variation, the differences or the categories are very distinct, and so you're able to separate them. They are not distributed on a continuum. These graphs here show you what continuous variation would look like and what discontinuous would look like. As you can see here, discontinuous variation is very distinct, and so you have all of these bands that are separate from each other and can be easily verified as separate categories. With continuous variation, on the other hand, things can be a little bit different. We can say that the tallest man in the population, for example, is 7 feet tall, but you might have a man that's somewhere here that is 6 feet 11. Now, can we say that a man who is 6 foot 11 is short? No, he's not. So we can't really have distinct patterns in continuous variation. We tend to have things in a continuum. In this continuous variation, you have different alleles at a single gene locus that have large effects on the phenotype. Different genes also have very different effects on the phenotype. Whereas in continuous variation, different alleles at a single locus have small effects on the phenotype. Different genes have additive effects on the phenotype, and a large number of genes can have a combined effect on a particular phenotype. These are some of the things that you might be asked, maybe perhaps to say what the difference between continuous and discontinuous variation is, but I have not seen many questions on that, so I wouldn't worry too much about it if I were you. Now, I mentioned earlier that the environment can affect phenotype, and it's important for us to highlight how that happens. Environmental factors can allow the full genetic potential of an organism to be expressed. And what this means, and what I often use as an example, is that you might find that some people carry genes for height, to be very tall, for example, but are unable to express these genes because they live in suppressive environments where they might not have nutritious food, where they might not have enough rest, or they just don't have enough nutrients in order for them to be able to express that gene to its full potential. In such cases, the environment is stunting the expression of the gene. Some people, for example, carry such genes, and when they move to new environments where they have access to more nutrition and access to more nutrients, they would then be able to express the gene to the full potential. That is why you're likely to find that some children will grow really, really tall compared to their parents or even previous generations, not because they belong to a different family entirely, but because they're in environments where they're able to fully express their genes to their full potential. Having lower or more light intensity, for example, can affect the growth of a plant. So if a plant doesn't grow tall, it doesn't mean it doesn't have the gene for tallness, but it means it might be lacking certain nutrients or light intensity. The environment also plays a role in Siamese and Burmese cats. These cats have an allele that codes for dark fur when they're in cold regions, but the dark fur is usually only in the areas where the animal is likely to get cold. As you might see in this image here of this cat, the tail is dark colored, and so are the feet, or I guess you call them the paws of the cat. In this case, what is happening is those are the regions where the cat is likely to get cold, and as a result of that, there's an allele that expresses dark hair in cold regions or in cold temperature. It has also been found rather that if you pluck these cats in certain regions where they've grown white hair, so for example, if we were to pluck this cat here and we put it in a cold environment or a cold room, the hair that would grow back in that region that was plucked will be dark in color, which means that the environment is dictating what the color of fur of the cat should be in certain parts of its body.